Welcome to the Word for the Week. This is where we unpack the Bible with our eyes wide open on the world that's around us, of course, the world we're living in, trying to feed our hearts that we trust are ready to find hope in God and in His Word. Today we're diving into a difficult but urgent passage from 2 Thessalonians 2, 9-12, and Paul's here describing a world just like ours, where deception reigns and where truth is rejected, and God hands people over to live with their chosen information sources, inclinations, sometimes even delusions. Now we're living in a world where the information space can be easily corrupted, and we can begin to live and live with all sorts of things that are not actually true because they sound kind of nice to hear. Paul is talking about here the lie they chose to love. And what we find out here is that what you love is what ultimately shapes your destiny. You might think that you need to do something that's really terrible, totally unlike you, to find yourself facing lostness and perdition. Well, let's see if that has any basis in the Bible, because the polar opposites in this passage, the difference is not between good and bad, but believing the truth or delighting in wickedness. Now that's a lot to swallow, isn't it? Straight off the bat there. So let's take a moment to walk through this together. But rest assured, look, we're going to be clear because this is urgent. But the message here is actually a message of great hope. So yeah, welcome to the Word for the Week. The first thing to notice here is that might is not always right, and not all power is from God. Paul says in verse 9, the coming of the lawless one will be in accordance with how Satan works. That's 2 Thessalonians 2:9. The coming of the lawless one will be in accordance with how Satan works. He will use all sorts of displays of power through signs and wonders that serve the lie, and all the ways that wickedness deceives those who are perishing. Whoa, Paul, what's going on here? Well, Paul's warning of a counterfeit appearing. The Greek word is parousia, a false coming that mimics Christ's return. Here's how the devil works, he says. All sorts of displays of power through signs and wonders that serve the lie. It's what the old translation calls lying wonders. Personally, I think that sums this up perfectly. Lying wonders. It looks impressive. It looks spiritual, but it's powered by the bad guy, and its purpose is to deceive people about what is actually true and lead them through the failure of faith to a very bad place. Now there's something I need to make clear that often gets missed, but which is actually quite obvious when you look around you. You see, this isn't just about a future figure appearing or doing wonders or a future set of events. It's a pattern we already see around us. Fake spirituality, exerting power without truth, signs without substance. They're really around us here. Even out here in rural Wales, we're not removed from nor immune to this sort of stuff. See, people are often very impressed by dramatic experiences or prophetic claims, but Paul is clear. Not all power is from God. So as Gordon Fee puts it, Satan's counterfeit will come with spectacular effects, mimicking Christ's return, but ultimately serving falsehood. There's the key. Is it for real? Yes. But is it true? Guys, if it leads you away from the truth and from Jesus, it isn't from him. It's from the bad guy. Don't be fooled by the glitter, but go for the gospel. Well, what sort of people are taken in by it then? Well, the people who are deceived by all this powerful appearances in the disinformation space, who are deceived? Well, they didn't just miss the truth, you see, these guys, they refused it. Verse 10 of 2 Thessalonians 2, Paul says the deceived perish, this is very important, because they refused to love the truth and so be saved. They don't perish because they were confused, because they didn't know better. Not because this was fun and they liked it, because it confirmed the way they wanted to be thinking. No, they get into the mess that they're mired in because they really very simply were those who refused to love the truth. Leon Morris pointed out that the failure to trust the gospel, the truth from God, is a moral failure, not merely an intellectual one. People make these sorts of decisions on how they feel. People don't stumble into soaking up this sort of deception. They sprint into it with their hearts wide open to unrighteousness. And there's the key to what motivates. Now notice this. To be able to do this, to give themselves to what they feel like, they need to deny the truth. You can't live with the truth and with that pattern of lifestyle. See, in rural Wales, we've got the problem that many people know the truth in theory. They've heard the gospel, they believe there must be a God, they'll even tell you, of course we're Christian, we're Welsh. But look around you at what happens, at what people actually love, what actually goes on because of that, and you'll work out. Mere assent to the facts, a mere cultural allegiance even, is not enough. Paul's challenge goes much deeper. Answer with your life now, Paul is saying. Can you really say you love the truth? Or is it more accurate to say that your delight is wickedness? See, loving the truth means embracing the gospel, not just as a doctrine, but as your joy, as your compass, as your foundation. Had you worked that out yet? Well, of course you had. You know you can't be a Christian unless you're committed to loving God's way, God's truth that explains what his way is. Says a lot about the people who are deceived, doesn't it? Well, where does living with untruth to suit your feelings and your passions and your desires, where does that lead to? It leads you to the God who isn't fooled very easily. Verse 11 here really hits very hard. For this reason they loved unrighteousness instead of the truth. For this reason, it says, God sends them a powerful delusion so that they will believe the lie. Well, hang on now. Are we saying God sends delusion? It looks like it, yes. But here's the thing. Don't toy with the idea that this is God tricking the innocent. This is God confirming the guilty in their choices. They're in this situation because they did not love the truth. They chose not to. They took the other option, which Paul tells us is delighting in wickedness. Now, this, of course, isn't just Paul's idea or opinion. There's a guy called Gene Green, I kid you not. He links this with Isaiah and Ezekiel. Prophets who warned that if people reject God for long enough, he eventually lets them have their way. And travel the road their way takes them, until they arrive at the place that it leads. So in Isaiah 6, 9-10, you've got God giving people over to their own ways. Go and tell this people, he says to Isaiah, be ever hearing but never understanding, be ever seeing but never perceiving. Make the heart of this people calloused. Key idea there is that God commissions Isaiah to speak to a people who've already hardened their hearts against God. And this word that he speaks to them becomes a kind of a judicial hardening. They hear, but they haven't chosen. They've chosen not to respond. They've chosen to reject for so long. They're stuck in that way. It's a passage echoed by Jesus in the Gospels, directly connected to Paul's idea of God sending a strong delusion here in 2 Thessalonians 2:11 as judgment for persistent unbelief. You've chose it, you'll have it. Isaiah 66, verse 4, same sort of idea. I will choose harsh treatment for them, says God. I'll bring on them what they dread. For when I called, no one answered. They chose what displeases me. He lets them have their chosen path. You get it in Ezekiel chapter 20, verses 25-26. Same principle. God handing people over to what they've chosen. Paul echoes that in Romans 1, we'll see in a minute. And it's here in 2 Thessalonians 2. Therefore, God sends them a powerful delusion. It's the one they've chosen. Well, look, in both Isaiah and Ezekiel, you've got this persistent rejection of truth leading to divine judgment through deception, not because God is deceitful, but because he hands people over to the lies that they've chosen, the deceptions they've wanted. Now, those Old Testament passages. They form part of the theological background of what Paul is teaching here in 2 Thessalonians 2, where the strong delusion is both a judgment and a consequence of loving unrighteousness more than the truth. I just mentioned, didn't I, that this theme crops up again in the Gospels, in the teaching of Jesus. In fact, it's in all four Gospels that Isaiah 6, 9-10, talking about it back in Isaiah's day, gets quoted. You get it in Matthew 13, 13-15. You get it in Mark 4, 11-12. You get it in Luke 8, verse 10. You get it most clearly perhaps in John 12, 37-40. Even after Jesus had performed so many signs in their presence, they still would not believe him, John writes. This was to fulfill the word of Isaiah the prophet. He has blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts. That's John 12:40, quoting Isaiah 6. Refusing to believe, then God confirms you in your unbelief, blinding and hardening them. Harsh, their choice. And it crops up again famously in Romans 1, in Paul's letters. Romans 1, God gave them over. It's a recurring theme. Romans 1, 18-32, there's this pattern of rebellion and divine abandonment. Threefold structure in which God gives them over. Paradokein autois. In response to humanity's rejection of his truth. Suppression of the truth leads to idolatry. Romans 1, 18-21 tells us the wrath of God is revealed against all the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth in their wickedness. Yes, you see, you've got to suppress the truth or the wickedness doesn't last. You can't. You get it further on in that same chapter. It says, therefore God gave them over to sexual immorality. In Romans 1:24. God gave them over to shameful lusts. Romans 1:26 talks about even their women gave up natural relations for relations with other women. It says God gave them over to a depraved mind. Romans 1:28. Furthermore, just as they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, so God gave them over to a depraved mind. It's exactly the same pattern we find in 2 Thessalonians 2, 11-12. God sends them a powerful delusion so that they will believe the lie they're clinging to. What's being said is that this judicial hardening confirms God's justice in letting the rebellious remain where they are. And it reinforces this connection to 2 Thessalonians 2, where people are given over to deception after rejecting the truth. And that makes Isaiah's vision central, not just to prophetic ministry, but to the New Testament's explanation of why not all people believe the gospel, even when it's clearly proclaimed. If you love the lie more than you love the truth, God will not force you back to the truth. You will carry on down that road. But you'll carry on down that road to where it leads. Now, that's quite fearful. That might shake us. It might shake us with fear. We don't want it to shake us with fear. We want it to shake us with urgency. Because the longer we toy with untruth and its consequences, the more we become blind to its cost. Well, 2 Thessalonians 2:12 sums it up for us, defining the choice that defines eternity. What you love shapes where you go. Verse 12 sums it up. So that all will be condemned who have not believed the truth but have delighted in wickedness. There's the divide. There's the contrast. Belief in the truth or delighting in wickedness. So that all will be condemned who have not believed the truth but have delighted in wickedness. The crucial question here becomes, what's this truth, Paul, that we're supposed to believe, that he's trying to tell us determines a person's destiny? See, it's not whether you're a good boy or a good girl or not. It's whether you accept or reject the truth in order either to stick with godlessness, wickedness, or in order to put your trust in the living God. Well, there's evidence from 2 Thessalonians 2 here, verse 10. They perish because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. The truth here is the life-giving thing. It's the thing that leads to salvation. And that aligns precisely with Paul's use of the truth elsewhere as he's talking about the gospel message. Verse 13, just after this passage. God chose you as first fruits to be saved through the sanctifying work of the Spirit and belief in the truth. Belief in the truth is synonymous with saving faith, grounded in the gospel, expounded in other Pauline texts like Ephesians 1:13. But here Paul explicitly defines the message of the truth as the gospel of our salvation. Comes up like that again in Colossians 1:5 and 6, comes up like that again in Romans 1:18. Yeah. That echoes the moral rebellion in 2 Thessalonians, not just error, but willful suppression of the revealed truth about God. Where you stand on God's truth, that's what he's getting at, and that's what saves. The truth is therefore the gospel that saves. Yeah. The nub of it, the heart of it, the center, the fulcrum of God's truth is the gospel truth about what puts a person right with God. What is this truth? It's the opposite of delighting in wickedness. That's the second thing we need to say. Paul contrasts believing the truth with delighting in wickedness, 2 Thessalonians 2:12. So the truth isn't just a set of abstract propositions, a doctrine. The truth is actually moral and personal and relational. It's about how we relate to God. To believe the truth is to embrace the gospel, to submit to Christ, and to reject unrighteousness. And that matches up with John 3:19-21, doesn't it? Where Jesus says, this is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but people love darkness instead of light. Whoever lives by the truth comes into the light. It's the opposite of delighting in wickedness. It's the nub. The nub of the truth is the gospel, what puts a person right with God. Turn from sin, trust in Christ. Truth is the opposite of delighting in wickedness. And so in summary, what we can say is that 2 Thessalonians 2:12, the truth refers to the gospel message about Jesus Christ, crucified and risen, the revealed reality of God and his righteousness, and a moral and relational allegiance. To embrace truth is to love Christ, to live in the light, to reject the lie. And to not believe the truth is to willfully reject the gospel and side with unrighteousness. Hence Paul's sobering conclusion here. Condemnation is not for ignorance, but for rejecting by not loving the truth that saves. Paul isn't just talking about what people do. He's talking about what people love. And there's the battleground of salvation. What you love. Either you love that which you wouldn't and it'll turn you away from the living God and you'll reject him, you won't trust in him, you'll reject his truth. Or you love him, love his truth, love his ways, walk in his ways, because that's what you delight in. The choices we make now shape the kind of people we become. And those choices will determine our destiny. So let's ask ourselves, what do I take pleasure in? What do I celebrate? What do I excuse? Because eternity isn't just about what you were sent to, agreeing theoretically with the facts of the faith. It's clearly, Paul is saying here, about the state of your heart. What you love. And that's what it all turns on. Okay, let's bring this home. Paul is not trying to terrify the Thessalonians or us. He's trying to anchor us in the gospel, the truth that saves. Now, there is a Christ who is coming, but not in deception, in the misinformation space, disinformation space, like so many false saviours held out to us. He is coming not in deception, but in glory. And he calls us today to love the truth, to delight in righteousness, and to live awake and alert in a world full of seductive lies, where the information space, the stuff we take in, is manipulated. Often in a covert sort of way, a deceitful sort of way, to secure its own ends and not our good. So the message is pretty clear. Don't be swept away. Don't coast on cultural Christianity or what you read on the internet. Don't be taken in either by lying wonders. Love the truth, says Paul. Live the truth. And let's commend the truth to the people we live amongst. Well, there's the word for the week. Thanks for tuning in to this week's podcast. If this challenged you, great, share it. If you want to go deeper, get in touch. Contact us. There's contact buttons everywhere, all over our social media and around this video here. Check the episode notes for resources and keep your eyes open. We might be posting some short video clips from each part of this message. Feel free to share those with your friends and with your family too. But until next time, God bless you. Stay faithful. Stay rooted. Pay attention to loving the truth. Not your definition of the truth, which can be so tied up with what we desire and how we feel. Not our definition of the truth, but His. And then everything else that God requires of us and for us will flow from that.